Welcome back to Sports and Movies Podcast. Your host, Corey, coming at you now. One thing that I saw on social media that's a little bit bothering me is this sort of revisionist history surrounding Michael Jordan and his legacy, right? I see people, these WNBA interviews with these players and young NBA players or prospects coming up, and they ask them, who's your favorite player? Who's the greatest player of all time? What's your Mount Rushmore, et cetera, et cetera. And people are naming people like, Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's fine player. Kevin Durant is a top 10 player all time. Kevin Durant should be number one on no one's list. And I'm going to obviously explain to you why, but I hate where they, instead of, playing Kevin Durant's credentials and why he's deserving of being number one or something like that, they always have this revisionist history surrounding Michael Jordan's legacy and the era that he played in, and saying, it's not good enough to compare the Redeem Team to the 2008 Redeem Team to the Dream Team 92, or this current year 2024 Olympic team to the Dream Team 1992. First off, if you look at Michael Jordan highlights, right, he has highlights of posterizing Hall of Famers, Hall of Fame talent, like
Jordan trying to shake off Starks.
That's one of the craziest dunks, and he has Dikembe Mutombo. He has some of the great bigs, Alonzo Mourning, some of the great bigs of all time he's going against, and they say that he didn't go against any talent. My second greatest player of all time is LeBron James, but third, Shaquille O'Neal. And if you look at Shaquille O'Neal for let's say a 4-year window, he was unbeatable, and I saw him up close. I had season tickets to the Nets when the Nets, led by Jason Kidd, were making the Eastern Conference Finals, and they were going up against the Lakers team and got swept. Even when the Sixers, led by Allen Iverson, went up against the Lakers team and got swept. Please, Shaquille O'Neal was unbeatable for a period of time. And Jordan faced him head-to-head. Shaquille O'Neal was drafted in 1992. And in the 1992 draft, the top 3 picks were him, Alonzo Mourning, and Christian Laettner, right? So don't tell me that there wasn't any talent. They had the expansion team. The Orlando Magic was an expansion team at the time, and they had Penny Hardaway, Nick Anderson. That team actually went to the finals. They had beat Jordan's Bulls, and they remember the first year back after Michael Jordan had unretired from baseball, they had lost to the Orlando Magic, and then the Orlando Magic faced Dream, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Kenny Smith, and Robert Horry, and these guys, Clyde Drexler in Houston, and they actually should have won that series, but they lost. So should have, would have, could have. But that's the type of talent. You have Hakeem Olajuwon, you have Charles Barkley, the marquee players at the top 10 players can go up against any players of the 2000s or any players of the 2010s. And then I did see that Kevin Garnett responded to Anthony Edwards' criticism, saying that sort of criticizing the older guys, the older generations, 2000s, even the 90s. Although I disagree with what Anthony Edwards said, he said basically that during that 90s era that Michael Jordan was the only one with any skill. I do agree with what Kevin Garnett said, where in terms of the physicality, it was very difficult to score at that time, so finesse players would not fare too well, or it would be much more difficult for them to score, and you wouldn't see the high scoring numbers that you see now from like Luka Doncic, things like that. In a much more physical league, those numbers go down drastically. But Anthony Edwards is, Ant-Man is one of those talents that transcends generation. He's a generational talent. and he can succeed in any era. That's a guarantee that Ant-Man he would dominate the 90s, he would dominate the 2000s, he would dominate the 80s, obviously. He would dominate any era. He's one of those talents that's just, he's ascending right now. He's not even at his peak. But look in the next, 2, 3, 4 years for him to win MVP, or at least to be in the top 3 running for MVP.
Look at D'Angelo Russell's face.
Oh!
Just because of last night, yeah, they started off well, but then the legs would catch up a little bit.
Anthony Edwards, major elevation, levitation for Ant.
Get out the way, little fella. I'm taking all of this and some. Ant-Man, flex on him, young fella.
Front row seat on the differences of drop coverage, especially when you have Anthony Edwards just hopped up.
On Tillman, I don't like this. I like this one better.
Ooh, they were lucky that wasn't turned over. Anthony Edwards, that time he does finish with the exclamation point.
Filthy.
There have been very few in-game dunks that have looked like that.
Put that on a poster.
And only had one shot attempt in that first half. Another turnover for Utah. Edwards gets it back and threw it down.
To make noise if they can re-sign their key players. So, please, don't criticize Anthony Edwards. He's one of those guys that's just a transcendent talent, a great talent, right? But also don't diminish Jordan's era because, like KG said, there was much more physicality and there was great athleticism. I can name, several players in the 90s. Sean Kemp, the list goes on with phenomenal athleticism. Like I said, Shaq is my number 3 player all time, and he was drafted in 1992. So don't make it seem like he didn't even win his first championship. Let's see when he won. Shaq won his first championship in the 2000 season. So he was drafted in 1992. It took him 8 years to reach the pinnacle. Okay, there were some great players in the 90s, and we don't need to diminish that era. Now, even Michael Jordan's best stuff. I look at when I evaluate players, I look at the talent. Obviously, that talent has to lead to some sort of success, some sort of victory, MVPs, NBA championships to validate the opinions, because this is really all subjective. This is all opinion based. But that being said, I do the eye test first, and I look at the prime 5 to 8 years when this person was at their peak, at the pinnacle of their game. And for Michael Jordan, it was like 87 to 92, right? And that encompasses his first championship. But 87 to 92, when he was winning scoring titles and things like that, Michael Jordan was that Michael Jordan, not the old 96 Bulls guy. I'm looking at 87 to 92. And I'm
Gives to Jordan. Jordan to the circle, puts the shot in the air. Good! The game's over, and the Bulls have won. Jordan beat him at the buzzer with a jump shot in the circle, and Chicago has knocked off the Cavs 101.
LeBron's highlights or anybody's highlights, although I looked back at some of LeBron's highlights, and he has some pretty monster highlights himself. But in terms of the iconic stuff, when I look at poster dunks, Mike has Hall of Famers on his hit list. So, please don't diminish the 90s. It was a great era. David Robinson, even Tim Duncan was around. A lot of my top 10 players all time were around in the 90s. So please don't do this. Don't diminish that era. And then, like KG said, the physicality. Real quick on the movie side, there's a new Netflix documentary. That's coming out. It's called Starting Five of this series, and LeBron James is going to be in it. Obviously, Anthony Edwards is going to be in it. Obviously, but that's something that is on my lookout list. So definitely watch out for that. And speaking of LeBron James, just to end on this final note, I noticed that I saw a clip, I don't know how recent it was, but he was talking about his Mount Rushmore of NFL quarterbacks. And obviously LeBron James has a significant football background, so he's qualified to speak on this. But he botched the last one. It was obviously Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, obviously Joe Montana. I'm fine with that. And then he put who did he put? He put John Elway in there, and I thought the obvious was Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning has 2 Super Bowls. Although he was most prolific in the regular season, he still has 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams. So that's pretty remarkable. So that's it. Pretty light. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing, and continue to do so and tell your friends. And I look forward to this NFL season. Go Jets. Take care.